I think there are aspects of Christian spirituality that have been neglected in the Western church context that I find so important and compelling. Like seeing God in nature and creation, just to offer a really simple example everyone can relate to.
Yep.
And we all experience what we term transcendence in nature. But I would say this, here's an experience everyone can relate to. There are moments when you behold the beauty of creation, and the internal experience is one of surrender and contentment at the same time. Like, when you can be on a backpacking trip, utterly exhausted, thinking about nothing but dinner, just getting to where you're going, taking your shoes off because your feet are aching, and eating a meal. And then you turn a corner and you see a black bear, and you just stop. And it's like all the senses that were within you, plotting your future, just everything ceases. And no one seeing a black bear in the middle of the trail is thinking about themselves, their want, and no one tries to hold the moment and keep it forever. You just surrender and you behold for however long you get to behold, and then the bear wanders off and you feel hungry again, you keep going, But what is that? What is it that I experienced there? The best term we have is transcendence, but that experience is a lot like the scripture describes life with God.
There's that line, I think it's in 1 Peter, where he says about Jesus, although you haven't seen him, you know him, and you experience inexpressible joy.
Yes.
And that's such an interesting, he's using words, but he's saying actually words cannot, this is something that is just beyond the capacity of words to communicate. You have a wonderful story in your book. By the way, I often hate it when people will say that to me because I can't remember by the time I've written a book what was in it or what wasn't. But this you probably will. It's most likely an apocryphal story about Augustine and a little kid that sees him and the overwhelming nature of Trinitarian thought.
Yeah, so there's a story about Augustine, probably just a legend, but who knows, that he would always walk along the sea on Sundays between preaching sermons. And this one day he's walking along the sea, and he sees this little boy who's dug a hole in the sand, and he's running with a bucket and filling it up with water and coming and dumping it in the hole. And Augustine watches him do this over and over and then says, "What are you doing?" And the little boy says, "I'm going to take that great big ocean and put it in this hole." And Augustine says, "You can never fit the big ocean in that hole." And he says, "Easier for me to fit the ocean in this hole than for you to fit that great big Trinitarian God in that little mind of yours." And I think, look, if there's a God, which there is, I'm barely scratching the surface, and I'm going to swim in his being forever and never reach the end of him. So to try to, and this will scare some people, but I'm just being honest, to try to condense that God into like a math equation that I can fully understand and comprehend every last bit of is obviously to minimize the majesty of who God is to some degree.
I'll ask you this. I don't even know how to put this in the right words exactly. I don't think I've ever quite asked it before. But being a pastor, there's always the temptation to sound like I'm more certain than I really am, or that I know more than I really know. And then when we're just sitting around talking like this, there can be all kinds of stuff, all kinds of questions that I have as a human being that as a pastor, you're kind of not supposed to have.
Yeah.
Do you find talking openly about having a sense of mystery, does it help you be more honest with that when you're on a platform in front of a group of people? Do you wrestle at all with that? Here's what I'm supposed to know or supposed to believe, and when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm all by myself in bed at night and something scary is going on in my life, how do you navigate that?
I would say for me personally, and this would be different for different folks, but I don't doubt what I would term as the essentials. You know, I've been through some hard things in my life. I'll go through more hard things in my life. None of them have caused me to doubt the Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, the only way to the Father. None of them have caused me to doubt the love and justice of God. There are questions I sometimes have about how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But I think the essential nature of the message of the gospel is something I feel settled in and that I'm not looking over my shoulder about. And so I think when I talk about mystery, and the reason it intrigues me is just to say there's joy and wonder to who God is. I'm still going on to discover what it means to follow him. And essentially, I would say the spiritual journey is so much going from seeing God sometimes in places I expect to find him to seeing God everywhere, especially in the places I wasn't taught to look for him.
Yeah.